God bless you. It's great that we can meet together in this fashion as we have already broken the seal, the 12th seal on this book, the book of Ecclesiastes. It has been a journey. It has been a journey, and I really trust and I hope, as we have said in our previous sessions, that the steps that we have taken together, the chapters we have read together, the verses or the passages that we have read together to reach up to the point, that it has been a blessing to you, and that there are areas that has been open unto you, areas that you have not seen. I'm not saying that you have not read. Yes, you may have read the book of Ecclesiastes many times. You may have addressed many situations and circumstances. You may have taught, you may have preached from the book of Ecclesiastes. But this time around, because we are doing it in this way, there are things in the book that you have not seen before. And as I've always said, there are many points, many uh, many doors I have just opened, so to speak. I've opened. I haven't gone in, but I've opened. You've noticed. I have not gone in and explained anything because I know there's a handle. Because if I went into every door that was open, then the time taken to finish or to reach this far, I would not be this far ahead. No, I wouldn't be. It would probably take me a whole year and even more if I was to explore every passage, every door that is open. It would take me far longer. So I've just opened the doors so that you can see, that you'd be aware that there is a door, so that you can go into. Now, it's not that I'm leaving it open for you and you alone and I won't go in. No, I will go through, but I will go in at a later time. I know that there are many passages, many things I have unearthed, and I haven't gone into that passage. I have not dug any deeper in certain areas than where I've been. But I know where I've been, and it is for me now that after I finish with the Ecclesiastes, that I go back in my time, in my own time, stay in one area for a little while and see what else needs to be dug up, so that I, in my ministry, in my helping someone, in my exhortations, in my counsel or counseling, whatever the case may be, I will know that much more, so that I will be able to help someone, I'll be able to assist someone in the gospel, in life, giving wise counsel. How can we have an individual like Solomon, who has left his word or his words for us, and ignore him? He's left wise counsels for us, wise words for us, words of wisdom, words of knowledge, and words of understanding. So may God bless you as you navigate on the scripture, whether you do it on your own or you do it within a group of individuals, whatever the case may be. May God bless you, and may God really grant you the desires of your heart, in that as you read his word, he will open your eyes, he will open the avenues of your understanding, your avenues of knowledge and of wisdom. That when men see you, hear you, when men sit in your presence and you share words of encouragement, that they will hear the wisdom of Solomon. They will hear the knowledge and the understanding of Solomon come from you. Why? Because you have read his word, you've taken note And not only of Solomon, but the wisdom of God. Because all that Solomon had really, the great knowledge, the great understanding that he had, and the wisdom that he possessed was all of God's anyway. So really, who we really should take note of and really look to is God. In the 12th chapter of Ecclesiastes, we have been told to remember God and to fear him. Solomon, the king of Israel, the man who was wise above all, he had much understanding and his knowledge was great. It would have been a pleasure. And I know the day is coming. I believe the time is coming when we are all going to be in the presence of God. Yes, I believe we're going to get to know Solomon. And I cannot wait, if at all possible, to see Solomon, to meet him, even just to sit down and to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and even to ask him a few questions. I don't know whether or not it's going to be useful or needed or what, because our eyes, I believe, is going to be open, and we, I believe, when we're in the presence of the Lord, we're going to know more than we know now. Anyway, even though we're going to be there to worship God, I believe that that's going to be the first and foremost things of all that are in the presence of the Lord in the glories there. But I believe at the same time, I have a feeling that we're going to see others, we're going to know others of the scriptures. And to some extent, I also have a feeling that we're going to be able to ask them something. We're going to get to know what it was. But in the book of, or in the chapter 12, it's about remembering God and the fear of God. Within this particular chapter, also, there are four areas that Solomon wants us also to take note of. One, in our youth, we must remember God. Or, in other words, we can turn it the other way around. Remember God in our youth. Remember God in your youth. That's what Solomon is said to those who were with him, to those who sat in his courtyard, in his throne room. Again, he may have been in his dining or lounge area. He could have been outside. He could have been in his garden. He was a very rich man, so he had a lot of places to go where he could relax and share words of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Yes, countless places. And he's speaking to us. And I can imagine him at this time, at this time of his life, of his kingship, saying to others with all experience and the experiences which he has had, he says, remember God in your youth. The second point that I believe he is saying to us also, and he's driving this home, is that we must remember God before death comes, or before death, remember God. So in our youth, and even before we die, before I die, I don't know if you are going to die, so I won't say you. But before I die, I must remember God. Remember God in every point of our life. If we say to a young man or to a young man, to our young sons, to our young daughters, to the babes, when we look at them as they're born, and tears may come to our eyes. Tears have come to my eyes many times as I look at my grandsons and granddaughters. When I see and view what's happening in our world and how wicked, how sinful, how dangerous, It is now, what is it going to be like in the next 5 to 10 years for them as they grow? 15 years, 20 years, if the Lord tarries, as they mature into this world. What kind of world is this world going to be for them if it's like this now? Tears come to my eyes because I wouldn't want any of my children or grandchildren to be hurt or to be burdened with the situation that is prevailing around us today. So we must remember God. We must remember, remind them and tell them to remember the Creator in their youth. We must be able also to remind them to remember God before death. The third point here also is to study the teaching of the teacher. Studying, remembering the wise words of the teacher that had been told to us from chapter 1 all the way through now to chapter 12. We must remember. We must read. We can't remember what we don't read. And we can't remember if we haven't committed anything to memory. We have to read the scriptures. We must read the commandments of God. We must be able to read the whole counsel of God. And how can we know the counsel of God if we do not read the counsel of God? And what is the counsel of God anyway? Isn't it the Bible? So we have to read the scriptures. We must commit ourselves into the reading of the scriptures. That is so important. It's vitally important that we read the scriptures, especially in our day and time. What are we saying to our young men and young women? What are we saying even to those who are aged? How can we encourage one another if we're not committing the word, even to ourselves? What then are we passing on to others? And the fourth and the last point in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, the teacher, the preacher, Solomon, the king of Israel, tells us with all that's going on, he just repeats himself, but he's driving a point home. And you know what that point is? Fear God. Fear God and keep his commandments. Okay, so in this session, we're going to do the very first point mentioned, which is remember God in your youth. Or, as I have stated in the top line there, in your youth, remember God. We'll be looking at verses 1 to 5 of Ecclesiastes chapter 12. I'm going to read those verses here from the King James Version, and then I'll read the same 5 verses of chapter 12 from the Jewish text. Okay, and we will then go from that point. Another 4 days, and can you imagine we finish chapter 12 and the whole book of Ecclesiastes? But let this not be the last time that you will at least sit and take time and go through the scriptures. No, make it a habit now. Find a little portion of your day just to read. You don't need to read the whole chapter. Just read a portion of any part of any chapter within the book of Ecclesiastes. Get to know it. Let it be firmly rooted in your heart, in your mind. Let the Ecclesiastes be ready to flow from your lips, because this world is looking. They're looking for wise men. They're looking for wise women. They're looking for men and women of understanding, and they're looking for men and women of knowledge. But not just understanding and knowledge of what's happening in the world or in life. That is intriguing. But we also need wise men and women men and women of understanding, and men and women of knowledge in order where the scriptures are concerned, so that their lives and the lives of men and women will be handed over to the Lord. So let me read these first 5 verses, chapter 1, chapter 12 of Ecclesiastes, and I'll read from both of what I have here, King James Version and Jewish text. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. While the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease, because they are few, and those that look out of the windows be darkened, and the doors shall be shut in the streets, when the sound of the grinding is low, and he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. Also, when they shall be afraid of that which is high, and fear shall be in the way, and the almond tree shall flourish, and the grasshopper shall be a burden, and desire shall fail, because man goeth to his long home, and the mourners go about the streets. Now, there are three main points, three main issues here where Solomon is, which Solomon is pointing out to us, the reader, but he's also, I believe, as he talks to those who are in front of him or with him, could have been one individual, it could have been two, it could have been his family. We just don't know. But I believe he was talking to someone. He was sharing with someone. There are 3 points here. One is that we must remember God before old age comes. Two, we must remember God before we are before we become weak and aged. And we must remember God before our life ends and you go to your eternal home. Three areas here within these 5 verses that we must uh, consider. Let me read this from the Jewish text. So remember the Creator while you are young, before the evil days come, and the years approach when you will say, they no longer give me pleasure, before the sun and the light grow dim, also the moon and the stars, before the clouds return after the rain. On the day when the guards of the house are trembling, and men of courage are bent over double, when the women stop grinding grain, because they are so few, when the woman at the windows can no longer see out, when the doors of the streets are kept shut, when the noise from the grain mill fades, when a person is startled by the chirp of a bird, yet their singing is hard to hear. When they will be afraid to go up a hill, and terrors will stalk the way, even though the almond tree is in bloom, when the locust can only drag itself along, and the caperberry has no aphrodisiac effect, because the person is headed to his eternal home, and the mourners are already gathering in the marketplace. So, in those three areas that I pointed out, that Solomon really wants us to consider. Remember God before old age comes. Remember, that word signifies more than just to think about something. In this case, we are to remember God. It's more than just think about God. we must consider, observe, think deeply. From the moment one comes into this world, through life, and at the very end, Solomon, every now and again, is telling us that we ought to think about God. And not only think, but to consider, to observe. We ought to think deeply about God. We ought to pay attention to God. We ought to consider Him with the attention of obeying. And the teacher, the preacher here, King Solomon, admonishes us to keep our mind on God, to allow God to influence and control our decisions and our conduct. What should we, the question is asked, what should we specifically remember about God? We should remember that God is continually present in our lives. That's one thing that we should consider. One, we should remember that God is our creator and He literally made us from nothing. Mankind came into existence from nothing. And three, we should know that God will definitely judge our lives. He will judge our words, He will judge our thoughts, and He will judge our deeds. Every individual, saved or unsaved, the righteous or and the unrighteous, God will definitely judge every individual. That's what we've got to remember. When we remember certain things and we know exactly what the outcome is, we remember it. We do remember. And then we will do things in order to not to receive the penalties if any is coming. And or if we remember, we will receive the gifts or the rewards of whatever it is that may be coming once we know we've done right. But we've got to remember God. We have to remember God. Solomon's admonition to us is to live with the awareness of God throughout our younger years while we still have the desire and energy to enjoy the things that this life has to offer. And the later years will be days of the latter years will be days of no light or joy, days that grow dark from clouds of problems and the pain of growing old. This refers to persistent conditions, impairments, afflictions that do not go away. Let's look at verses 1 and 2 because we've been commenting on these two verses for a minute or so. It says, remember now that create in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. Verse 2, while the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. So, after dark, heavy clouds dump their rains upon the earth. What do? They roll on by, and when they have gone, the sun shines again. This is not the case with storm clouds of old age. They stay, they hover. I've never seen an old man get young again. Have you? They may behave young. They may look well. They may look as if some never age. But listen, in old age, when things begin to happen, they stay there. They hover over us. They don't go away. The rains may cease and the clouds may remain. And yes, at times, every now and again, it may rain even later on. And so, in the same way, um, older men in the latter years, senior citizens may find relief from the aches and pains of the body, but it is only temporary. The pains, the aches will return when the treatment wears off. And I have some fathers and some mothers around me that reminds me. Yes, they look around, but every now and again, the pains, the aches, yes, they return. They're there. Each day is a new day and it's a new story, a new experience that they say and that they share with us. In verses 3 to 5, remember there are 3 points in these 5 verses. In verses 3 to 5, Solomon, the teacher, is saying, remember God before death comes. Remember God before you are weakened with age. Let's read 3, 4, and 5 together. On the day when the guards of the house are trembling, and when of courage and men of courage are bent over double, when the women stop grinding grain because they are so few, when the women at the windows can no longer see out, when the doors of the streets are kept shut, when the noise from the grain mill fades, when a person is startled by the chirp of a bird, yet their singing is hard to hear, when they will be afraid to go up a hill, and terrors will stalk the way, even though the almond tree is in bloom, when the locust can only drag itself along, and the copperberry has no aphrodisiac effect, because the person is headed to his eternal home, and the mourners are already gathering in the marketplace. So let's look at these verses a little bit more closely. And the second point is remember God before you are weakened. Young individuals, young men, young women, girls, boys. The teacher here is saying that you should learn to faithfully walk with the Lord while you have the energy and the strength of youth. For a day is coming, a time is coming. You can't imagine it. When I was 20, I couldn't imagine being 60. When I was when I was 25 or even 30, I couldn't imagine 50 or 55. But a day is coming when your body, when our bodies age and weaken, and one will not be able to serve God as energetically as one did during their younger years. We or they will not endure putting in the long hours and participating in many activities. To illustrate this process, the teacher, the preacher, Solomon, the king of Israel, uses the image of a decaying house, one that is literally falling apart. Though various commentators interpret some of the metaphors differently, nearly all will agree that this is a graphic description of old age. Those who are in the latter decade of a normal lifespan will, will clearly identify with this description. Remember the Creator while you are young. Now, I'm not sure if there are any young men and young women who are listening to me right now. I'm not sure. I'd love to know that there is 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, 25, 30. I'd love to know that. And there are many who are of my age group that would consider themselves still young. And yes, yes, I don't want to dampen you at all. But we've got to be able to tell them. We must tell those young men, young women, our girls, our boys, our grands. We must be able to communicate to them that they should remember the Creator, remember God while they are young. There's about 11 points here that is very much reference or referring to what the teacher, preacher is saying here. And it's all within the scriptures between verses 3 and 5. What Solomon is saying here, remember the Creator, remember God before your limbs tremble and you cannot protect your home. Remember God before your body is stooped over. Remember God before your teeth start falling out. And that's all in verse 3. Remember God before your eyesight starts failing. Remember God before your legs become too weak to walk outside. And that starts in verse 4. Remember God. And Solomon is saying this, even though it's not as clear as what I'm pointing out right now. But this is exactly what the teacher, preacher, Solomon is saying. Remember God before your hearing fades. Remember God before you sleep or your sleep is halted or is interrupted by birds. And that's all in verse 4. In verse 5, remember God before your fear of heights and dangers restrict your actions. Remember God. Remember God before your hair turns white as an almond blossom. Remember God before your pace is as slow as a grasshopper at season's end. And the last point about remembering God, all in verse 5, is remember your sexual desire will go. A lot of people, they think that they desire, which is a natural thing because God has given every man and every woman that desire for each other. And even though, yes, human beings has taken it out of context, yeah, and they fool every man, and well, some men and women, they fulfill the desires of the flesh. They fulfill what their body craves for. Nothing wrong again if it's all again done within the means or the confines in which God has given them to be fulfilled. But all of that is going to go. All of that is going to disappear. Remember these things. Consider. Think deeply. Think deeply. No. Serve God in your youth. Serve God in your youth. Fulfill the desires of God in your youth. And the third and the last point that also is in verse 5 of Ecclesiastes chapter 12 is that we must remember God before our life ends and we go to our eternal home. One day, one of these days, we're going to move out of our earthly house of clay. Now, when you're 20, 25, 30, or let's go even younger, when you're 15 and 16, you don't think about that. You think life is ahead of you. And yes, it is. But before you blink, it disappears if you're not careful, if you do not get up and do what it is that is in your heart to do or your mind to do, you won't do it. It's the same thought here that we one day will leave this house of clay and we will move to a more permanent dwelling place. The teacher here, the preacher, who is Solomon again, all the way through Ecclesiastes, it is Solomon, the preacher, the teacher. Solomon now moves from describing the conditions of old age to describing the process of death. Solomon makes a transition from life to death, from this world to the next, from here to eternity with one simple, seemingly insignificant word. That word is then. In verse 5, verse 5, let's read verse 5. Also, when they shall be afraid of that which is high, and fear shall be in the way, and the almond tree shall flourish, and the grasshopper shall be a burden, and shall desire, and desire shall fade, because man goeth to his long home, and the mourners go about the streets. Let's read verse 5. When they were afraid to go up, and here I'm reading from the Jew text now, and terror shall stalk the way, even though the almond tree is in blossom, when the locust can only drag itself along, and the caperberry has no aphrodisiac effect, because the person is headed to his eternal home, and those are already gathering in the marketplace. This insignificant word in the KJV is because. The word is because man goeth to his long home. It's halfway down um, verse 5 here. There are no rockets or fanfare, no barrage, no poetic descriptive words, just then or because. How accurate and appropriate is the use of this one common undramatic word for dying. Think about it. This short, generic word links life to death or death to life. It is a word used numerous times by most individuals every single way or every single day without ever being aware of it. This is how closely and commonly we are linked to death. We are very close to death here. Very, even though there's nothing wrong with me. I don't feel ill. I don't feel well. I don't feel sick. Um, I feel I am well. I believe that I have nothing wrong with me. But even in my health, even in my expressions of what I've just said, I'm very linked closely with death because death is my next home. Death is my next move. Death is our next move. Solomon is telling us that. Solomon was realizing that for himself. Any human being stands just one then, one breath, one step, one word from eternity. We as humans, we stand just one breath, one step, one word from eternity. Everyone who has personally witnessed the death of another person understands this. A person is alive and then he or she is not. It is that quick. It is that simple. A man is breathing and then he is not. A person is present and then a person is not. A woman or a man is present and then she or he is not. Life and death, earth and heaven, or hell are held together only by the word because. How quickly we pass from this life to the next, because man goeth to his long home, and the mourners go about the streets. One day Whether we want to understand or believe or accept or not, someone is going to go about the streets to mourn our because. Someone, if the Lord tarries, someone is going to mourn our death, our transition from life into death. We must remember God in our youth. We must. It's important. As we live today, you may have children or you may have grandchildren, all great grand, but let them be reminded or put it in their hearts that they must live for the Lord. That they must live for the Lord while they have strength, while they have energy. Because one of these days, whether we are here or not, and most often it is about our children or grandchildren, we may not be here anyway, but one of these days they are going to pass from life to death. And how are they going to remember their life? Will it be one of happiness, of true happiness as we have spoken of before, because they have taken wise counsel. And they can only take wise counsel if you give them wise counsel. So give them counsel.